All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about the Chargers draft. What did they do? How did they address their needs? Because they did take, now going into the draft, they did take a trio of wide receivers. Receiver was a position that they needed because their receiver depth chart was thin. You had Joshua Palmer, Quinn Johnson, and also Darius Davis. At least that was from the last time I checked. But top two wide receivers were Quinn Johnson and Joshua Palmer. So they did end up drafting a trio of wide receivers. The first night they did take Joe Alt from Notre Dame. And a lot of people thought they were going to end up taking Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze or a receiver at that pick. Most people thought. I thought they would do that unless they decided to trade down. But that was not the case. They took Joe Alt. So you got him on one side. You're going to have Rashawn Slater on the other, which I think that's great. I agree with Jim Harbaugh when he says that, offensive linemen are weapons too. Now, he's using it in a different context, but I agree with him because you want to be able to protect your franchise guy in Justin Herbert. Now, at the same time, you also want to have guys that he could throw to, and that's what they ended up doing. So they took Ladd McConkey from Georgia. They took him in the second round. They also took Jerry Rice's son. They took Brendan Rice from USC. And then this was in the seventh round. And then with their final selection, another seventh-round pick, they took Cornelius Johnson from Michigan as well. And, Jim Harbaugh knows him very well. So they did that. So they added a trio of wide receivers. Now, I kind of wanted to go through their stats as well. So we'll look at McConkey's stats first with Georgia. So in 2021, 447 yards, 31 receptions, 5 touchdowns. 2022, 58 receptions, 762 yards receiving, and 7 touchdowns. And then 30 receptions for 478 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2023. Also had some rushing touchdowns as well. So that's what they did with their second round pick. 6-foot wide receiver, 185 pounds. And all right, so that was the one receiver that they added. So now we'll look at Brendan Rice's stats as well from USC, playing with Caleb Williams. So so he was taken in the 7th round, like I said, and so he was with Colorado for a couple years. But the numbers increased when he got to USC. 2022, 39 receptions for 611 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then in 2023, now again, a lot of these guys I'm not familiar with, but had a pretty good year. 45 receptions. That'd be crazy if he had 45 touchdowns. But yeah, 45 receptions, 791 yards receiving, 12 touchdowns. So that's impressive. And then we'll take a look at Cornelius Johnson's stats as well with Michigan. So with Michigan, and then of course it says this webpage was loaded because there was a problem. Of course there was. Okay, there we go. So he's 6'3", 208 pounds. He spent his entire collegiate career with Michigan. So he had 6 touchdowns in 2022. He only had 1 in 2023, but he had 604 receiving yards on 47 receptions. So had a career high in college in receptions, and he had 627 receiving yards back in 2021, but he had 604 in 2023. So the Chargers addressed the wide receiver position. They addressed the offensive line. They also took another Michigan player. They took Junior Colson, a linebacker, Justin Eboigbe from Alabama, defensive lineman. Again, the pronunciation. They They took a couple of corners. They took Tareeb Still from Maryland and Cam Hart from Notre Dame. They took another running back. They took Kamani Vidal from Troy. So that's what the Chargers did with all their draft picks. Again, they added depth. They added to their defense as well. Again, adding a running back, I think, in the later rounds. I mean, you could do that because you're banking on Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. I mean, those I think are kind of just. I mean, no offense to them, they might be just patches for the time being, because they've had their past injuries as well, so they're not going to be long-term answers there. And it's just funny how they have Greg Roman there, who was with the Ravens, and then you bring in two Ravens running backs in Dobbins and Gus Edwards. But I think the big takeaway from here is they did add wide receivers. They did do that, and you kind of figured they were going to do it one way or another. Now, again, most people thought they were going to end up doing that with their first pick, but that ended up not happening. But they addressed some needs, and again, they added to the defense as well. So you got to like what the Chargers have done. I mean, could they be a wild card team? I think they possibly could, just because, again, you got Justin Herbert there. And now with Harbaugh in the fold, I think this team is going to give teams problems. They're going to be a respectable team. You got to see what the wide receivers are going to do. Can Quinn Johnston take a big leap in year 2? Because, the Chargers were expecting big things out of him last year. And when Mike Williams went down, he was taking on a bigger role. And also Joshua Palmer, he was banged up last year. So, yeah, Quinn Johnston was looked upon as maybe being that number 2 wide receiver. And he just did not live up to that. Now you go into this year, you're going to have more of a role, I mean, you would think. But, you got to take a bigger leap in year 2, hopefully. And, again, the Chargers, like I said, taking a trio of wide receivers, you add more depth to the position. And we'll see if they add some veteran. There's still some veteran wide receivers out there that they could target potentially, but they might be good for now. And again, you went out and you drafted arguably the best tackle in the draft, the best lineman in the draft, in Joe Alt to protect your franchise guy. So, I mean, I like what the Chargers did. Again, I would have liked if they would have kept Keenan Allen, but they had to move off of him. He wasn't willing to take the pay cut that they wanted him to, which I kind of don't blame him because, he's coming off of his best year. Why are you going to make him take even more of a pay cut? He's going to want to pay raise, so they had to do that. And I know there's been a lot of memes and things with Justin Herbert, saying he's throwing to nobody. But I think the Chargers will be okay. I'm not expecting them, to be a top team, but again with Harbaugh, maybe they surprise some people and they get into the playoffs, maybe win a playoff game. I think that would be like my ceiling for them, is they make the playoffs and maybe win at least one game. And I want to see Justin Herbert go out there and play well, because I know a lot of people are criticizing him, not thinking he's that dude, but listen, he is super talented. And I think now that they have a head coach that, again, didn't win a Super Bowl, but has won a national championship and has been to a Super Bowl, has won NFC championship games before, or at least has been in a few. I think the Chargers are going to turn it around. And if not, then then I was wrong there. But you see what Harbaugh's able to do. He turned around the 49ers. He turned around Michigan. They won a national championship. So I'm led to believe that Harbaugh is going to do the same with the Chargers. Now, you're playing in the AFC West against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, and they're not going anywhere. Andy Reid's not going anywhere anytime soon. Patrick Mahomes is not going anywhere anytime soon. So that's going to be your biggest competition for years. And are you going to be able to knock them off and make your mark in that division? We'll see. I don't think it's going to be in 2024. I think this is a building block year, but again, there's no reason that the Chargers can't be competitive and, maybe be a team that gets into the playoffs with the wild card. I think they could do that. Because, again, with the quarterback, with the coach, I think they could do that. Now, again, when we get closer to the season starting and we make predictions and where teams will finish, that's when we'll go into more detail with where I think this team could potentially end up. But for right now, we're going to hold off on that because we got a long way to go before we get to that. Like once we get to August, then you'll start hearing me, bring up predictions and things like that. But for right now, we're not going to do that. We're going to stay away from that. I mean, listen, when the schedule comes out, maybe you'll see me go, they could win this game. They could win this game. We'll get into that. But, again, we're going to hold off on it. So, but let me know what you guys think on what the Chargers did. How do you guys think the Chargers did with their draft? Again, I mean, they addressed their needs. Added a couple guys on defense. Got a few wide receivers. Added a running back. Added a lineman. So I mean, they addressed their needs. So and some of these guys are going to need are more projects than going to be impactful starters right away. But I think I think the Chargers, like I said, they're heading in the right direction. And 2025, that could be the year where this team really takes off. They might be a year away, but I still, like I said before, I expect them to be competitive here. But I think 2025 is the year where they really, could take off. But again, there are still some free agents that are out there that they can maybe add a veteran wide receiver. I know teams. I think you'll see some of these top free agents now with the draft being over. You might see, depending on needs that teams still need, you might see teams now start, signing them. So, we'll keep an eye on all that. But with the Chargers, they, added more depth to their receiver room. And let's see how those guys do with Justin Herbert. So we're going to take our final break of the show. Again, let me know what you guys think about how the Chargers drafted. And then when we come back, we're going to discuss something Roger Goodell talked about, and that is his vision for an 18-game season. What he had to say on that, what could that mean? And that is what we will discuss when we come back from our final break of the show. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.